Greetings, everyone. It is a pretty clear but kind of misty in a way morning here in southeast Georgia. Not too hot yet today. We're going to have some more storms as we always do here in August, which hopefully cool it off in the afternoon like it did yesterday and the day before that. We can only hope. But right now, let's just jump into the news.
Yesterday visited a chocolate factory in Atlanta to learn how they're coping. GPB's Sarah Callis reports.
Chocolado is Atlanta's only chocolate factory. The company imports cacao beans from Central America and Africa since it is difficult to grow in the U.S. and imports sugar from Brazil. Chocolado founder Matt Wyant says increasing costs on raw materials and uncertainty around tariffs are presenting a unique financial challenge.
We have had to raise prices on our wholesale prices. We did that over the summer, and even that was hard to do because we don't even know what our cost of goods is going to be in 6 months. So to try to set a price for somebody is pretty hard.
Wyant says imports from Brazil are facing a 50% tariff, while cacao beans come with a 10 to 18% tariff, depending on where they're grown. For GPB News, I'm Sarah Callis in Atlanta.
Home Depot says shoppers should expect modest price increases in some categories as a result of rising tariff costs, though they won't be broad-based. The Atlanta-based home retail giant released its second quarter earnings yesterday, showing improved sales but still missing Wall Street expectations. In May, Home Depot said it did not expect to raise prices because of tariffs, but a company official told analysts yesterday that tariff rates are significantly higher than they were when the company released earnings results in May.
You're making home projects a lot more expensive.
Raydio network of Georgia Public Broadcasting.
Unfortunately, I feel like there are signs that the housing market is not as strong as the facade shows it to be. So it's gonna be rough.
Reservists for a major military operation against Hamas in Gaza City. The call-up letters are expected to be sent out soon, with the draft starting in the coming month. NPR's Jackie North reports from Tel Aviv.
The decision to call up additional reservists came after Israeli military leaders gave preliminary approval to the next phase of the war in Gaza. The increase will almost double
there was a ceasefire agreement
in the nearly 2-year-old war. An Israeli military official,
all lie.
on condition of anonymity, says
All
many of
lie.
the reservists will free up active duty troops currently deployed in other areas so they can fight in the densely populated Gaza City, in areas heavily controlled by Hamas. Israeli troops are already laying the groundwork for a broader upcoming operation. Jackie Northam, NPR News, Tel Aviv.
NATO defense leaders are scheduled to hold a virtual meeting today. They're expected to discuss what security guarantees could be offered to Ukraine to help end Russia's war there. Defense officials from the UK and other
the only thing you really can't do is NATO status.
to discuss the war. The governors of 6 states are sending their own National Guard troops to Washington, D.C. They're to assist in President Trump's initiative to tackle crime. But as NPR's Meg Anderson reports, several of those states have crime problems of their own.
Yeah,
The governors in West Virginia, South Carolina, Mississippi, Louisiana, Ohio, and Tennessee have all pledged to send their own National Guard troops to D.C. for the Trump administration.
So from my perspective, the placing the troops, whether they're National Guard, whether they're active duty, Army, Marine, Air Force, Navy, those guys really aren't going to as much as Marines and Army, right? To be police officers in cities is, one, outrageous, and two, unreasonable because it's not their job, right? These are, I spoke about it in a previous video, but the job of these men and women, the mindset that they're put into is to be killers, is to be weapons of war, right? You don't bring a weapon of war, a human weapon of war who's trained to kill, and their primary duty is to kill, to a city to promote peace. It's not how that works. They aren't an armed rebellion. This isn't 1863. This is 2025, where you got a bunch of racist old assholes who don't like the minimal peaceful resistance against their authoritarian policies. That's what it really is. And it's the association of race with crime, which is not like real. The thing that causes crime is not race. The thing that causes crime is poverty. So it's absolutely ridiculous. And this is my take on it, and a lot of other people's takes on it, is that every law enforcement officer in a federal branch that you take away from their job to become a petty cop on the beat is taking a resource away from an actual issue. Every man and woman that you pull from ATF is an asset that you're pulling away from illegal arms dealers and people who buy up American weapons legally and then smuggle them over to Mexico, right? Every DEA agent you pull off the job to go harass people just drinking a beer on their front porch in DC is an agent that is not investigating a major drug ring that is actually hurting these cities that Trump is targeting and wanting to target. Like, this is the crazy thing. Ultimately, I really don't like any of these federal law enforcement agencies because I see them not as a good thing on how they're run, in their day-to-day. I think the DEA is an evil organization that benefits from drug crime and would rather continue it than actually, stop drug crime. And unfortunately, the ATF, though they have a good moral goal, the very conservative courts have kind of hamstrung them, and a lot of their leaders are not the people we actually need to protect Americans from gun violence and to stop these arms rings from easily legally acquiring weapons and shipping them to gangs both in and outside of our country. So take that as you will.
The administration wants to reverse the scientific finding that's long been the basis for federal climate regulations, but that may weaken the oil and gas industry's ability to defend itself.
There's already a lot of climate change litigation. There's plenty of people out there doing lawsuits, and it seems like this would just invite a lot more litigation.
We'll have more coming up in 15 minutes on GPB.
Georgia Today is GPB's daily podcast, bringing you compelling stories and in-depth reporting from all across the state of Georgia. Join me Raydio for a quick and convenient way to get the best of GPB's coverage on politics, science, food, culture, and the arts. In just a few minutes, we'll be all caught up. Subscribe to Georgia Today and find your podcast feed every weekday afternoon.
This is Morning Edition from NPR News. I'm Michelle Martin in Washington, D.C.
I'm Martinez in Los Angeles. Following meetings with President Trump and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky at the White House, European leaders have been urgently trying to figure out what they need to do next to end Russia's nearly 40-year war in Ukraine. Coming up in a few minutes, we'll speak with Trump's former National Security Advisor John Bolton about what a security guarantee would actually look like.
But one thing the president ruled out is
the war hawks, John Bolton.
For Brussels, Terry Schultz joins us now to talk about challenges Europe faces with so many factors still dependent on Washington. So Terry, how have European leaders been digesting the events from D.C.?
Well, quickly is the best way I can describe it. It was less than 24 hours after those meetings at the White House that the EU leaders who'd been present there were back here in virtual sessions debriefing their counterparts. And that urgency just goes to show how high stakes the situation is for Europe. They had both a meeting of this coalition of the willing that some 30 countries, which at this
expressed their readiness to physically help support a ceasefire in Ukraine, and they have one with just the 27 EU member countries.
President Trump has made it pretty clear that he wants Europe to take the lead on Ukrainian security. That's our understanding, right?
And that's right, and they more or less already decided that themselves before Trump became more supportive of Ukraine, but now the president has confirmed it many times over. And the good news for the Europeans is that Trump is now pledging for the
H&K is probably going to enjoy the small arms sales, but
chairing the meeting of EU leaders, European Council presidents.
this is more me speaking out of my own butt because I don't know, but does Europe really have a Lockheed Martin? Do they really have a DRS, a Honeywell? I mean, not Honeywell, a Halliburton? Do they have, large arms sellers, large arms industry like that? Like I know there's British and German tanks out there. I know they have their own weapon systems, but are they as built up as the American military industrial complex? Right? Because we are the arms seller of the Western world. We sell our weapons to anyone willing to buy them. Honestly, I mean, I feel like if Russia tomorrow said that they would back out of Ukraine for a $100 billion deal to buy American weapons, Trump would heavily consider it, and then they turn around and use those weapons to reinvade Ukraine or invade another country in Eastern Europe, or maybe out in the Caucasus Mountains, right? Out in the Caucasus, like they did with Georgia all that time ago. So, not the state, the country. Or I should say the U.S. state. So, I don't know. This situation is getting sticky, in the words of Tyler, the Creator, and it's worse than it has been ever. And I feel like it might not get better, honestly. I feel like we're going to see either America completely dip out of the situation, and Ukraine will no longer have the weapons to defend itself long term from Russia, and it may become a complete takeover of their country by an imperialist invader, or the Americans are going to cause Zelensky to basically bend over and take whatever deal Trump and Putin decide on. So, just how it is, I guess. Maybe, I don't know.
National Security Advisor during the first Trump administration. He was also the U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations under President George W. Bush. Ambassador Bolton, welcome. Thanks so much for joining us once again.
Well, thanks for having me.
So before we get to the specifics of what a security guarantee could look like, can I just get your top line reactions to the events of the last couple of days, the separate meetings with the two presidents and the European leaders?
Well, I think there's a lot of movement, a lot of motion, but no real substantive change. There's no indication at all that Russia has in any way changed its objective, which is to bring Ukraine into the greater Russian Empire. Nor is there any real sign that Zelensky is prepared to do the sorts of things that Russia has demanded of President Trump, such as ceding a substantial part of the Donetsk Oblast or province, which the Russians have not yet been able to conquer militarily. So I think the motion has been interesting and is likely to continue because Donald Trump wants a Nobel Peace Prize. But in terms of actual movement towards settlement, I don't see it.
So okay, in recent days there's been a lot of talk about land concessions by Ukraine in exchange for peace. But I also want to say again that Putin's pretext for the full-scale invasion of Ukraine was the possibility of Ukraine's NATO membership. NATO membership is a security guarantee. So given that, what indication is there that any security guarantee that President Putin would accept?
Well, there's a lot of loose talk in the West about security guarantees, and many observers have pointed out we gave Ukraine security guarantees with the Budapest Memorandum in 1994. That didn't deter Russia then. People throw around this talk of an Article 5-like provision. Article 5 in the Treaty of Washington that created NATO is famous for the line that an attack on one will be deemed an attack on all. And nobody forgets the line, nobody remembers the line a little bit further down in Article 5 that says that each party will I'm quoting now, take such action as it deems necessary, close quote. So that could mean sending Ukraine a note saying, we're very distressed to hear that Russia's invaded you again. We wish you all the best and do let us know how it turns out. Article 5 in NATO means something because of the U.S. force behind it. Now, Donald Trump has said that there will be no boots on the ground. He has said something vague about air power, which a lot of people have taken to mean, okay, well, we'll be all right then, we'll be all right. Well, what air power does he mean? I'm not being critical, I'm just asking the question. Does he mean U.S. A-10 Warthog close air support aircraft involved protecting British and French troops on the ground? Does he mean U.S. B-52 and B-2 bombers striking strategic Russian targets to relieve pressure on British and French troops? Does he mean fighter bombers going in after Russian positions? Does he mean he's willing to accept American combat with Russians in the air conceitedly, but combat with Russians to protect the European peacekeeping force? Or is he talking about C-130 transport planes? It'd be nice to get an answer there.
So are European militaries capable of providing the type of security you described to Ukraine, or some measure of participation by the United States an essential element for this to be credible at all?
Well, I don't think they thought through what they really think they're going to do. Are they talking about? I mean, and it would be helpful to say what's the mission of this force? Is it to defeat a potential Russian incursion? Is it to be peace enforcement where there would be combat, or are they really talking and hoping and praying what they want is a UN peacekeeping force where the only use of force for the peacekeeper is in self-defense? So two very different missions, and the requirements are obviously very different as well. This to me is all indication that there's a lot of hot air out there. That's what diplomats do frequently. Even political leaders engage in hot air, but the substance here is pretty thin on the ground.
Before you get just 30 seconds left here, do you think that this is essentially a distraction to keep the war going because Putin thinks he has the military advantage at this point?
Well, I think Putin's doing just fine at the moment. I think what we've not done for 3.5 years, frankly, is giving Ukraine what's necessary, not simply to avoid losing the war, but to win the war. And I don't see, again, any indication, whether by the United States or by the Europeans, that's about to change. And as long as the real pressure that the U.S. and Europeans could put on strict sanctions, partially enforced, vigorously enforced, I think Putin thinks he can get away with it.
As John Bolton, he served as National Security Guard.
I mean, I'm also conflicted on the sanctions thing. I'm much more pro-sanctions than I am anti against Russia. But like Russia, the country of Russia itself has already been so extensively sanctioned that you can't really put anything directly on Russia to help at all, right? And so the next best option is secondary markets, right? Places that are dealing with Russia directly, which would work if we as a country hadn't already tried to just blow up the world economy, right? And how back and forth this administration really is with foreign economic policy, trade policy, right? Trump already has these huge tariffs getting implemented in India, which would be a main target of this whole tariff regime to build back America somehow, which is just implementing import taxes and sales taxes on all Americans from things that are made and shipped off from India. Same thing for China, same thing with other countries, right? But Russia has developed its own economic sphere of influence in a way that bypasses all these sanctions that we already have in place. And we've already strained every economic relationship we have with trade partners around the globe, right? Sanctions unfortunately only really work for allied countries, and they don't really work for enemy countries, right? And sanctions only hurt the civilians. They really honestly don't hurt the people at the top, the people in power in a country. That's why Cuba has had a struggle in a way for the last 70 years, right? After the fall of the Batista regime. But they're, relatively speaking, they're doing pretty well. They're probably one of the most well-off third world countries in the world, right? Or I guess former second world countries in the world. They got better literacy than us. They got better healthcare than us. They have better food than us. And that is in spite of American sanctions, right? So if we want to do economic policy to turn Russia, we use these stupid sanctions that we already have in place, because I don't know if there's really a point of even turning them up harder unless it's only against our allies. But we need to use these sanctions that are already in place and basically ask and make deals with other countries to eliminate all tariffs. Honestly, I think eliminate all tariffs with the country if they pledge and they stop doing any economic trade with Russia, buying their oil, buying their timber, buying their steel, anything like that, right? Any economic dealings. And if they turn back on that, then you ramp up the tariffs back on, right? I think that might be the best way to also deal with China. There is this very imperialist hate of China by our government, and its propaganda has just infected all Americans, really. And China has its problems. China has its social and privacy issues, I guess you would say, that the American government is trying to do on their own, honestly, with Palantir and other evil corporations like that, right? But China is an economic ally of ours. They are the largest producer in the world. They are one of our greatest trade partners, right? They build everything. If we wanted to, as a country, we could take these stupid goddamn tariffs that we have, or the threat of tariffs in 90 days plus 90 days plus 90 days, and just put it on the table and be like, hey, we're just gonna get rid of all this. No more tariffs. Goodbye, Chinese tariffs. They're dumb, they're stupid, they're whatever. If you cut off everything with Russia, and maybe they bite, maybe they won't, but I don't know. You can really only use tariffs as a political tool to force countries to do what you want if you already have oppressive tariffs. But ultimately, it's just going to hurt Americans more in the long run. And it's just one of those things I'm very conflicted with. I think we should get rid of all tariffs, or at least all these tariffs that we've implemented over the last 7 months, because they're stupid and they hurt Americans more than they help Americans. And it's just an additional sales tax that hurts poor Americans more than rich Americans, right? So it's just frustrating. It's just absolutely frustrating. But if we can get rid of these tariffs by stopping a war of an invading force and remending our relations to our biggest trade partner in the world, I think it's a good thing. So, but we'll leave it there for the day. I hope y'all have a wonderful Wednesday, and I'll catch y'all later.